women just spewing their demands of men. I think it's very hurtful for men. I think like a lot of men will see that and see that it's superficial. And especially if they're good men that want something deeper and they want a relationship, like that's disheartening in many ways, right? To see women out there just like, this is what I want from you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Here's my checklist.
Exactly. And, the reality is that nobody's going to probably make all those check marks. And even if they did, that doesn't mean that there's going to be any type of connection.
Welcome to the Emily and Todd Podcast. Today we're talking about the modern women's view of themselves and their expectations of men. Before we get started, please like and comment on the video as it does really help with the YouTube algorithm. Todd, so the modern woman and the expectations that she has for men, there's kind of two different ways in which women will come at their views on expectations. One is more positive. One tends to be more negative. I feel like the positive way that I've seen is where like women are showing off what their man has bought them.
Okay.
Right? Like they've purchased them this Mercedes, and they're showing it off on a video.
Okay.
But then the other way is more negative. And this was one TikTok that I recently stitched myself of a woman that had her list of things that she expected a man to pay for if she was dating him or in a relationship with him.
Yes.
And I'm just going to read off some of her expectations. All dates, nails, her nails, her hair, Ubers, because she was saying that, he needs to pay for the transportation to the date through an Uber, wax for her, and then her rent.
Yes.
Which blows my mind. So,
yes, when you stitch that and I saw that, I was blown away. It was almost unbelievable. I thought she was trolling. And then I contacted you and I said, we've got to talk about this. Just because of the fact that it was just outrageous. It
is. And truth be told, I feel like a lot of women would also see this as outrageous. They get it. But I think that it's dangerous that this kind of messaging is out there, right?
Yes.
Because it does have an impact. Women may not form these exact crazy expectations, but I do think that there's just this general feeling like women should be getting and taking and receiving from men.
Yes. Entitlement.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that if I'm going to be dating you, I'm entitled to certain things.
Exactly.
Versus it being an equal partnership. Which is ironic because of the fact that when it comes to equal rights, it's when it comes to this area, it doesn't apply, right?
Double standard, like a lot of things.
Yes, complete double standard. But the interesting thing with that specific TikTok is that, first of all, it's super not unique nowadays. And second of all, this woman was very unattractive. Honestly, I don't think most guys would be attracted to her, period, let alone that with her list of demands and her attitude that kind of came along with it.
Yeah, so this is what I saw in the comments too when I went there, is that obviously because I stitched it, I think it drew a lot of men's attention, and then they went into the comments. And that was honestly the most popular thing, was that they were pointing out that she's not even, that attractive. Or they would say, what is she bringing to the table? Which I think is a very valid argument. And no, it's not the nicest thing to point out somebody's looks, but it's difficult because he or she is kind of setting a tone. And I think when you set that tone, you get into dangerous territory. Like, you are opening yourself up to this being a transaction, right?
Yes.
I want this from you. So then he's asking, well, what do I receive from you if I give this?
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with like any kind of deep connection, any emotions, any of that. It's all superficial.
Well, and a lot of the women I've seen talk about this, they say kind of, I am the table.
Yeah.
right? So it's just my presence, being in your life. That's what I bring to the table. It's not saying anything as far as specifics,
Yeah.
right? And so it's something that if you have this list of demands that you have, then what are you giving back? But even then, I don't think anybody should have a list of demands for anybody. When it comes to dating, it should be something where I would think with the movement of feminism as far as equality, that we're looking towards saying, okay, how can we make this an equal partnership, versus saying this is something that I really need, and if I don't have these, I'm not even going to consider you.
Yeah, it's frustrating for men, right? Because I think that this develops for a few different reasons, but I think that it continues because of one, and that's because there's so many options that women have versus men, right? So it's like women can just go to the next man and make these demands as well. I don't think that women, especially like this one, where she's listing extreme demands, is ever going to get anywhere. Like, I just don't think that she's going to have success. But she's still able to probably get a first date here and there, or even a second date possibly. Or, men in her comments saying nice things to her occasionally, or on her Instagram liking her photos. So she's still like receiving this positive feedback even when acting a certain way, and I think that kind of forces it to continue.
If a woman back 20 years ago would have said something like that, not only would have she been laughed at, she would have been ridiculed.
Right. You're totally right. And in this case, like, I don't know if she would have been ridiculed if the men hadn't found this video. Like, I think that a lot of women would actually pump her up for it, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of women seeing that type of TikTok would say, wow, she's got confidence.
Yeah, she's confident. She's queen.
Confident. She's queen. And it is ridiculous. That's what I don't like, because it's bad behavior, and I am not for attacking somebody's looks. Like,
Yeah,
I would never
understand.
want her
Of
to
course.
feel terrible for that. But I'm going to attack the fact that she's expecting these things
Yes.
from a man.
Absolutely.
Because I do think, like, if she was a 10 out of 10, like, I would be saying the same thing.
Yes.
But she would probably have, like, a lot more likes on the video. It might be viral at this point,
The simps would come out.
The Sims would come out, and
Yes.
and he'd say, "Oh yes, anything for you."
Anything for you. Yes, absolutely. Maybe it always was kind of the 10s who were doing this, but now it's got to the point where it feels like it's almost all women, that there's a certain kind of this expectation, at least on social media anyways.
Yeah,
It's kind of female empowerment, but to the degree where it's delusional.
it's female empowerment and like body positivity.
And it speaks to the larger kind of, I think, delusion that's going on as far as what people think that they can kind of get out of other people and how they view themselves in general.
Yeah, I would honestly say that for this woman on TikTok spewing out all of her expectations, to me, watching that as a woman, I see her as not confident. And I don't know if all women view it that way, because a lot of them would be in the comments pumping her up and saying, "Go queen." I don't see it that way.
I thought she was trolling because it was just something that didn't line up, didn't make sense at all. First of all, that you would actually have the audacity to go on social media and say, this is what I require for you to date me. And then second of all, the combination of that plus her being so unattractive. It was the combination of those two things where I just was like, what is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
is this real?
So I think that highlights how, like, you're logically thinking through it, right?
Yes.
And that makes sense to me, that, like, as a man, I think most men do that.
Yes.
But from my end, it was like I was taking more of that, like, emotional, like, why is she feeling the need to do this? And my answer to that is that she is not confident, or she has lacked in her past relationships. This is what she didn't receive. She was hurt. Something happened. And now she thinks that this is going to protect her. Right? Like, if she finds these things that a man can give to her, she's in a good relationship. She's protected. She's the one that's wanted. She won't be discarded. She won't be cheated on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it, and I think there's probably truth to that.
Yeah.
And it's, but it's also coping, don't you think, for her?
If she's not having success right now dating, if she's not finding the type of guy that she wants, instead of looking inward at herself and figuring out what she needs to change about herself, she's come up with a list of things that she just wants that man to have.
Yes.
So in that way, it kind of saves her, if a guy kind of eliminates himself early on, she could see that as, well, it was because of her demands, right? It wasn't him rejecting her.
Yes. I really believe that the biggest problem is actually men and simping. What men are doing is that they simp and undercut each other to the point where it gets down to that level. And she must have heard, besides from her female followers or friends, messaging from men at some point that said something positive about her. The reality is that guys are doing this because they'd rather get somebody who's less attractive than zero. And it's one of those things where it just is not, it's not effective, and it hurts other men.
Right. And I do think
and
that
it spreads delusion.
It does. And I think that some women will even go on dating apps because maybe they're feeling not so great about themselves.
Yes.
And
validation seeking.
They will get the validation just from having matches.
Yes.
And then they won't even start a conversation, or they won't even...
Or they'll respond to a conversation.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that dating apps alone have also contributed to the
absolutely.
delusion.
Absolutely. If you were on dating apps and you were consistently connecting with guys who are in the top tier, and then, you had experienced that, do you think you would be able to adjust then and say, I'm not going to swipe right on this guy anymore
I think
because he's really good looking?
I totally get what you're saying, and I agree. I think on dating apps, it does make it harder because you're leading with a photo, and you are reacting off of that. I think it would be harder to then just decide to start swiping on ones that I am seeing like less attractive.
Yeah, everybody should get off the dating apps because it's not reality, and both genders are being hurt by this.
Well, I think too, talking about the impact of this and like just TikToks and other social media being out there of women just spewing their demands of men, I think it's very hurtful for men. I think like a lot of men will see that and see that it's superficial. And especially if they're good men that want something deeper and they want a relationship, like that's disheartening in many ways, right? To see women out there just like, this is what I want from you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Here's my checklist. Exactly.
And, the reality is that nobody's going to probably make all those check marks. And even if they did, that doesn't mean that there's going to be any type of connection.
Right. And don't you think that like if they do get into a relationship, right, like things could change when they're in the relationship, and you already have this dynamic set up where she has these expectations, and then if something happens and you're not meeting one of them, she is more likely to see the grass is greener somewhere else.
Yeah. And women have that option nowadays because they have so many more options that hypothetically they could say, this guy isn't meeting one or more of my demands, so I'm going to try to find someone else. And they can. Now, whether that's going to last or not, it's probably the same thing. No, but it's in the short term, they can go back on the dating apps and have 4 dates in a week if they want.
Yeah.
Or a day.
And I think there's totally men that have experienced this, whether it's just when they're in a simple relationship, just dating, or even in marriage, where they feel like they've been left and she moves on very quickly because she had already had, somebody else lined up.
Yes.
So I think for men that are seeing like this type of woman that is kind of spewing her demands at you, I would advise to stay away, if they're unreasonable and if they're all about things that you're giving to her, especially to do with like money.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, I would think that it would be a huge red flag to have any demands anyways, as
Right.
far as, because if you've ever been online dating, a lot of times women will have that actually in their profile. And so it's something that, like, if you're not 6 feet tall, swipe left or whatever. And it's something that, that's a gigantic red flag, because it's setting up this dynamic of an unhealthy relationship from day one. Versus saying, okay, like, we're two human beings and we're attracted to each other, and let's get to know each other, and let's try to, figure out, kind of how we can enhance each other's lives. Not, you need to bring this into my life, and if you don't, I'm not interested.
Well, I'm curious to know, in your experience in therapy, did you were mostly working with couples that had been together for a long time, I'm
Yes.
assuming. Would you see any of that dynamic, like, later on, years later, where you could almost see that one was demanding more from the other? Or do you think those couples were just non-existent at that point?
Yeah, most of the couples I worked with were, even if they were younger couples, it was something where it didn't have to do with demands. It was, I think that you're correct in the fact that they wouldn't even make it to couples counseling at that point. I think it would have fizzled out prior to that. And I think that's why we're in a mating crisis. And when I use that term, it's for both men and women, because people are having a hard time really connecting and having relationships, versus hookup culture and, all of these kind of 1 or 2, 3 dates, and then it's over because the person doesn't meet their criteria, or even getting in the door in the first place.
It's so interesting that this is the dynamic that's going on, but the reaction from women is to increase expectations.
Yes.
When I think the message should kind of be the opposite, which I know would get me in hot water, right? If I ever said to any woman, like, you need to lower your expectations, like, that is unacceptable, I feel like, right now in our culture, at least from women. Men might receive that differently. Hearing a woman tell that to another woman, like, he might actually just agree with that.
Yes.
But I think that standards and expectations are different, right? Like, standards, you just wouldn't even interact with that person to begin with. And they're, I think, like, typically more based in values. I don't know if you see it that way, and then expectations are more like once you're interacting with each other and you're, like, placing that demand on the person.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's, a couple different things. It's one of those things where, from a guy's point of view, am I attracted to her, and is she a nice person? Like, that's kind of
that would be
typical,
standard.
That would be the standard.
Okay.
But beyond that, there's not a lot of expectations.
I was going to say, what expectations do men have for women?
Just to be a nice, agreeable human being.
But that's, like, more of a standard.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they have any expectations.
No, I mean, just not to cheat, I guess, and to leave. But it's not like it was in the 50s where, he expected dinner to be on the table when he got home from work, or her to take care of the children exclusively. It's 2022. Like, I think most guys are in a place where they're saying, okay, I'm going to contribute.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I see that and hear that all the time.
Yeah, whether it's helping cook a meal or cleaning up after, or, co-parenting with children, and all those different type of things. I think most men have gotten to the point where they're saying, this is something that I'm interested in participating in. And so beyond that, I don't really see a lot of expectations that are going on.
I think on an individual basis, if you're a woman, like, really rethink what's important to you, and maybe consider lowering some of those crazy expectations that you might have.
Yes.
Really focus on the things that are most important and the values that a potential partner has that, they share with you.
Wouldn't you say also to, like, give a guy a chance, get to know him,
Yeah.
spend some time with him, and maybe if he's not 6 feet tall, but he's like a decent looking guy, he's a normie, right? And, like, he could be a really good, hardworking man and enhance her life in a lot of ways, versus saying I have to have these crazy expectations.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one thing, but we're probably mostly speaking to men. And for men, I think it's the message I really want is you got to stop simping.
Yeah.
And I know that's tough, especially if, you're not getting a lot of choices and options, but it's just not a strategy that works. And so it's something that you've got to stop.
Do you think simping is really just occurring online then?
No, I think it's
okay.
I think it's occurring everywhere. I think guys have a really high sex drive, and I don't think most women can appreciate how high that is. And so it's one of those things where if their needs aren't being met, then they get to a point where they say, I've got to figure this out. And how I'll do that is I will go down if I have to.
Oh.
Or I will, get to the point where I will give all this validation and even get to the point of giving money for attention.
Or what about even like staying in a friend zone?
Yes, exactly. Being in her orbit.
Right.
And hoping that one day he gets picked.
Yeah. So it's giving too much without receiving really anything back.
Yeah. Well, the definition of simping is giving without receiving anything back.
There you go.
And I think that's become an epidemic, and I think that has to stop. Like, guys have to have enough self-respect to say, you know what, I would rather be on my own and be okay with that rather than saying that I'm going to, give this woman attention and validation and money and all this other stuff that this woman demanded, because you lose self-respect, and the woman's not going to respect you for it anyway. So where's a relationship like that going to go? Like, for example, if that woman in the TikTok that we were speaking of, if she did find someone who met all those requirements, how is that relationship going to play out? From a therapist's point of view, it's going to be unhealthy from day one. And she's not going to respect him, and most likely she's probably going to leave him. Because then what's going to happen is she's going to say, I got those things. So if I can get those things from this guy, why can't I get from another guy who's maybe better looking?
Plus some, yeah.
Yeah, or he has more money or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So it's the message needs to be sent to guys to really stop this. And it's just really counterproductive.
I totally agree with all of that.
I think another possible solution to correcting this long term would be for men to just not put up with this and to have strong boundaries and standards as far as their interactions with women. And if they come across women like this, to really say, absolutely not, I'm not interested. And if enough men do this, that can help with the course correction. I
think honestly, if a man did that, he is going to be seen as more attractive and higher value to women in general. I mean, that means that you're a man that has a lot of self-control and he has that respect for himself. He has those boundaries. He's not willing to just go get with any woman that he can get. I think that is viewed as really a high value man. Yes. So I think there's multiple reasons. Not only is it going to be better for him internally, but he's actually probably going to end up with having better results in the dating world.
Long term, hopefully, yes. But even if he doesn't, I think that going through life and having self-respect is so important. And even if you, right now, for whatever reason, you're excluded from the dating market, I think it's really important to say, I'm going to work on myself for myself and get to a point where you feel good about yourself for who you are and the accomplishments that you've made in life. And to really focus on saying, if I'm going to have a woman in my life, she's going to be kind and she's not going to have a list of demands. And if I can't get that, then I'm better off by myself. Because I really believe it's better to be single than it is to be in an unhealthy relationship.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So stop simping, guys, please.
Yes. Please stop.